When Ava Matthews first pulled into the quiet cul-de-sac of Evergreen Heights, it felt like breathing for the first time in years. The air was crisper, the lawns impossibly green, and the houses all had identical white picket fences that gleamed in the summer sun. For a widow who had spent the past few years bouncing between cramped apartments and hospitals, the suburban dream wasn't about prestige, it was about peace. For her daughter Emily, it was about finally having a backyard and a chance to just be a kid again, without pitying glances or cold hospital walls. This move was more than a fresh start, it was a silent promise Ava had made to her late husband that their little girl would be safe. Emily, just 8 years old, was the kind of child who made strangers smile without meaning to. Her laughter had a musical quality to it, like wind chimes on a breezy porch. Born with a spinal condition that left her partially paralyzed from the waist down, Emily relied on a lightweight wheelchair to move around, but there was never anything disabled about her spirit. She wore mismatched socks on purpose, loved glitter like it was a primary color, and insisted on waving at every single neighbor, even if they never waved back. She saw the good in people, always. Evergreen Heights was an HOA community, meaning a governing board regulated everything from mailbox designs to acceptable lawn heights. Ava had hesitated at first. HOAs had a reputation for being rigid, but her real estate agent assured her that this particular neighborhood was family-friendly and tight-knit. That was all Ava needed to hear. She'd spent too long as an outsider. Here, maybe they could belong. The first few weeks were filled with small victories. Emily made fast friends with Mrs. Lopez, the elderly lady 2 houses down who always left fresh oranges on her porch. The mailman, Todd, let Emily honk his truck's horn when he delivered packages. Ava started a tiny herb garden in the backyard, something she hadn't done since before her husband deployed. For a while, life felt good, normal even. Emily had picked up a habit since moving in. Every Saturday morning, she'd ask to bake cookies, snickerdoodles were her favorite, and then roll door to door delivering them in a little basket. She called it her Smiles and Sugar mission. Some neighbors laughed and accepted them. Others declined politely. But one house always remained cold. 1148 Maple Drive. That house belonged to Brenda Thompson. Short, gray blonde hair, stiff posture, garden gnomes lined up like soldiers, and not a single smudge on her driveway, the woman practically oozed HOA perfection. And from the moment Ava moved in, she felt it. That gaze. The way Brenda would stand on her porch and watch, not with curiosity, but with a quiet, simmering disapproval. When Emily rolled past her house on her cookie routes, Brenda didn't smile, didn't wave, just stood there, arms crossed, as if Emily's joy was offensive. The first real sign of trouble came a few weeks in. Ava noticed a fresh sign nailed into Brenda's flower bed. No soliciting, no exceptions. The letters were jagged, written in red permanent marker, and it had clearly been made by hand. It didn't match the neighborhood's uniform aesthetic, but nobody said anything. The message was clear, even if it wasn't official. Ava warned Emily gently, asking her to skip Brenda's house next time, but Emily just blinked and said, "But I have extra cookies, Mama. Maybe she's just sad." A few days later, another sign appeared beneath the first. "This means you." Still, Ava didn't want to stir anything. Brenda hadn't said anything directly, and it was just one neighbor. Besides, the rest of the block had been kind. Emily's joy was contagious, and Ava found herself smiling more often than not. But something in Brenda's eyes always felt wrong, cold, clinical, and sharp like broken glass. One morning, while Ava was watering the garden, she saw Emily at the edge of the driveway, waving at someone across the street. Ava turned and spotted Brenda standing at her mailbox, not retrieving mail, just watching. In her hand, she clutched a small leather notebook and what looked like a fountain pen. She was scribbling something. When she caught Ava's eye, she didn't look away. Instead, she raised an eyebrow, turned briskly, and walked back inside. That night, Ava found a folded paper in her mailbox. No envelope, no name. Just a printed notice that said, "Children must be accompanied at all times." Violations may result in fines or restrictions. Please review HOA Policy Packet Section 3B. There was no signature, but Ava didn't need one. She knew where it came from. She sighed, shredded the note, and didn't tell Emily. Instead, that weekend, she helped her daughter roll a new batch of snickerdoodles and accompanied her around the neighborhood herself. Most people smiled, accepted the cookies, and even chatted for a bit. But when they reached Brenda's house, Ava gently nudged Emily forward and said, "Just skip this one, sweetheart." Emily hesitated, frowning. "But she might be lonely," she whispered. "Sometimes people are mean because they're hurting." Ava crouched beside her. "I know, baby. But sometimes we help people by giving them space." As they turned away, Ava felt eyes boring into her back. She glanced up. Brenda was standing inside her living room, the blinds pulled slightly apart. The notepad was back in her hands. That night, Ava dreamed of doors slamming, of harsh voices and flickering porch lights. She woke to Emily snuggled beside her, holding a crumpled drawing of a smiling house with hearts above it. "This is ours now, Mama," she mumbled. "Nobody can take it from us." Ava kissed her forehead, silently praying that was true. But deep down, something in her gut twisted. This neighborhood had secrets, and she had a feeling Brenda Thompson wasn't just another grumpy neighbor. She was watching, waiting, and writing something they weren't supposed to see. The storm hadn't come yet, but it was already gathering. The following week began with a thud, quite literally. At 6:45 a.m. on a cloudy Monday, Ava was startled awake by a loud knock on the front door. Still groggy, she opened it to find a stack of papers neatly rubber-banded together and dropped onto her welcome mat. A bright red slip was taped on top. Notice of violation, HOA enforcement notification. Her stomach sank. She flipped through the pages, disbelief spreading across her face. The list was absurd. Unattended minor presence on private property, non-compliant solicitation, failure to enforce supervision, and community disruption. Each offense was paired with a fine, $50, $75, $100, adding up to nearly $500. It was signed by Gregory Allen, the HOA president. Confused and infuriated, Ava stormed down to the HOA office that afternoon. It was a small modular unit tucked behind the community center, where the smell of stale coffee lingered and beige dominated every surface. Greg sat at his desk, a balding man in his early 50s with a permanent air of discomfort, like someone always one word away from a migraine. He looked up, startled, as Ava walked in. "I'd like to contest these notices," Ava said calmly, but her voice trembled. "My daughter hasn't done anything wrong." Greg cleared his throat, glancing at his computer screen. "Well, Mrs. Matthews, we've received several reports of disturbances involving your daughter. Brenda Thompson submitted video clips, written complaints, and cited multiple violations in our charter." "She's 8, Ava replied sharply. "She was handing out cookies. She wasn't selling anything. And she was supervised by me." Greg shifted uncomfortably. "I understand how it might seem harmless, but Brenda has a right to request no solicitation. You have to understand she's a long-standing resident and has contributed a lot to this community. She's very involved." Ava clenched her fists. "So that gives her the right to harass my daughter?" Greg hesitated, then gave the weakest response imaginable. "We're just trying to maintain harmony, Mrs. Matthews." Harmony? What a joke. By the time Ava left, she was shaking with anger. The system wasn't just biased, it was built to protect people like Brenda, people who knew how to manipulate bylaws and bend weak men like Greg to their will. She tried to shield Emily from it, but it was impossible to hide everything. The fines, the stress, the way neighbors had started looking at them differently, some with pity, others with discomfort, and a few with averted eyes, as if guilt by association was contagious. Then came the notes. First, it was a folded letter in their mailbox that read, "Maybe your kind doesn't belong here." Then chalk graffiti appeared on the sidewalk near their house. "No soliciting equals no speds." Ava reported everything. The cops said there wasn't enough evidence. Could have been local kids, one officer shrugged. Greg promised to look into it, but nothing changed. Then one day, Emily came home in tears. Her wheelchair was covered in wet mulch and twigs. I was trying to go down the path, she sobbed, but someone blocked it with garbage bags and sticks. I fell trying to back out. Ava rushed to her aid, heart pounding. She looked down the street and noticed Brenda's front door ajar, and just barely visible behind her porch plant, a small security camera aimed directly at Emily's usual cookie path. That night, Ava walked down to Brenda's house. She knocked. Brenda didn't answer, but Ava could see her through the front window, standing just behind the curtains. Ava stared for a few seconds, then walked away. No words, just a message sent through silence. But Brenda wasn't done. The next day, Ava received an email from the HOA with 3 video clips attached. They were grainy black and white surveillance footage. Each one showed Emily approaching Brenda's house on separate Saturdays, smiling and waving, holding her cookie basket. The subject line read, "Pattern of repeated trespass. Consider formal disciplinary action." Ava stared at her screen, stunned. Her daughter was being surveilled, recorded, and treated like a criminal by a woman who lived 300 feet away. She showed the footage to the local community officer, but again, the response was neutral. "It's her property," the officer explained. "She has the right to install cameras and submit reports. It's not illegal." Legal didn't mean right, and things only escalated. 2 weeks later, Emily disappeared for 30 terrifying minutes. She had gone out on her usual cookie run with Ava watching from the porch, but when Ava turned to grab something from the kitchen and returned, Emily was gone. Panic ripped through her like a wildfire. Ava raced around the neighborhood, screaming Emily's name, banging on doors. Several neighbors stepped out to help, but no one had seen anything. Just as she was about to call 911, Emily rolled into view. Quiet, eyes wide, visibly shaken. Ava ran to her and knelt down. "Where were you? What happened?" Emily looked over her shoulder and whispered, "She told me I wasn't allowed to go near her house again. She yelled and said I'd be arrested if I touched her driveway. Then she grabbed my handles and pushed me back toward home." Ava's blood ran cold. "She touched you?" she asked. Emily nodded. "She said she was just helping, but she was mad, Mama. Really mad. She said I was breaking the rules and that kids like me didn't understand boundaries." That night, Ava filed an official complaint. The next morning, she found another violation notice on her door. This time, it was about improper waste container placement. But it wasn't just the notice that shook her. It was the final line in bold. "Repeat violations may result in legal escalation or HOA-sanctioned removal proceedings." HOA-sanctioned removal? Ava sat down, eyes burning, fingers shaking. The message was clear, they wanted her gone. But she wasn't going anywhere. Not now. Not while her daughter was being targeted. She'd fought for too long. She had buried a husband who served this country, and she was not about to let some bitter suburban tyrant dictate their lives. Brenda had declared war. And Ava? She was just getting started. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind where the sunlight filtered softly through the trees, and everything seemed still, deceptively still. Ava had just finished helping Emily bake a fresh batch of cookies. They were Emily's special treat, cinnamon sugar with little heart-shaped sprinkles on top. Emily had insisted on delivering them herself, despite Ava's hesitation. "Just 2 houses, Mama," she begged. "Mrs. Lopez and Mr. James. That's it. I promise." Ava knelt in front of her, brushing a strand of hair behind Emily's ear. "You sure you're okay? We can go together." "I'm big enough," Emily said with a smile. "Besides, it's daytime. Everyone's home." With a protective glance down the street, Ava finally nodded, watching as Emily rolled off with her basket in her lap and sunshine lighting her path. She stood at the door, arms crossed, watching every inch of her daughter's journey. Emily made it to Mrs. Lopez's with no issue. They exchanged waves and smiles. Ava relaxed slightly. She watched as Emily turned toward Mr. James' house, but something went wrong. Instead of turning right, Emily veered left, toward 1148 Maple Drive. Ava's stomach dropped. From a distance, she could see Emily hesitate at the sidewalk. She paused, turned, looked back, and then, as if emboldened by some invisible courage, rolled gently up to Brenda's porch with her basket in hand. No, 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 Ava muttered, stepping off her own porch. She started walking, then jogging. Emily's sweetheart, no. Then the sound cracked the air like lightning. Bang! A single gunshot. Ava screamed. She ran full speed now, her heart slamming against her chest, her legs trembling as adrenaline hijacked her body. Neighbors flung open their doors. Someone yelled. Someone ducked. Birds scattered from rooftops. When Ava reached Brenda's driveway, she saw her daughter lying on the pavement. Not shot, but shaken, her wheelchair tipped over, arms scraped, cookie basket spilled, cookies crushed like broken innocence. Emily was crying, gasping between sobs. She shot at me. Mama, she shot. Ava dropped to her knees, scooping Emily into her arms. It's okay, baby, I've got you. I've got you. She turned her head, and there stood Brenda on her porch, holding a small silver revolver in one hand like it was a TV remote. She didn't look panicked. She didn't look scared. She looked annoyed. I told her not to come here, Brenda barked. I warned you people. I got signs up. No trespassing. No soliciting. I told her. You fired a gun at an 8-year-old. Ava screamed, her voice breaking in raw disbelief. She's a child. You could have killed her. Brenda's face twisted with fury. I have every right to defend my property. Castle doctrine. Look it up. Neighbors had gathered now, a small crowd forming on the edge of the cul-de-sac. Some whispered, others filmed with phones. No one stepped forward. No one intervened. Ava cradled Emily in her arms as sirens began to wail in the distance. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers rolled onto the scene. Blue and red lights flashed across every window. Officers stepped out, weapons holstered, tense but calm. Ava stood, trembling. She shot at my daughter. My disabled daughter. Unarmed. Unthreatening. Look at her. One officer gently guided Ava and Emily away as another approached Brenda. She still held the revolver, loosely, casually like a prop. Ma'am, I need you to put the weapon down, the officer said. Brenda scoffed. I'm on my own porch. I'm not breaking any laws. Please place the firearm on the ground and step back. She obeyed, slowly, placing it on her welcome mat like it was a fragile heirloom. Emily clung to Ava, silent now, eyes wide, shock setting in. Her tiny fingers gripped Ava's shirt like a lifeline. A paramedic came to examine her while officers took statements. Brenda was questioned on the spot, arms crossed, eyes rolling with each answer she gave. She came up to my house after I explicitly told them not to. I've got the signs posted. I've got the footage. I thought she was trying to harass me again. It's not my fault they let her wander like that. The officer's brows furrowed. You discharged a firearm. Brenda shrugged. At the mailbox. A warning shot. Didn't hit her. Just made a statement. Which, by the way, is legal on private property in the state. The conversation continued for almost an hour. And then, impossibly, they let her go. No handcuffs. No charges. No apology. Brenda picked up her revolver, slipped it into a lockbox, and walked back inside. Ava was stunned. She ran to the officer who had taken her statement. You're just letting her go? She fired a gun near a child. There was no physical injury. It didn't appear she was aiming directly at her. We'll document everything and forward it to the DA's office for review. Are you kidding me? Ava snapped. If she had shot an adult or a white child, would it still be just a review? The officer looked away. That night, Ava sat on the couch with Emily, who wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak. She just held her knees to her chest, eyes glazed, flinching at every sound. Ava scrolled through her phone and found the HOA community group. She posted everything. Photos, video, the incident. But within minutes, the post was deleted, flagged for neighborhood unrest. Then her phone buzzed with a message from Greg. Please refrain from sharing sensitive content online that might damage the community's image. Brenda is cooperating, and we trust law enforcement to handle it. Let's try to move forward peacefully. Peacefully, Ava looked down at her daughter, who now shook at the sound of a doorbell. There was no peace. Not anymore. Emily didn't speak for 2 days. Not a word. Not a whisper. Just sat curled in her blankets, clutching her stuffed koala and staring at the floor. Her eyes had changed. Once bright and fearless, they now held shadows far too deep for an 8-year-old. Every small sound, keys jangling, tires outside, the creak of the front door, made her flinch. Ava tried everything. She cooked Emily's favorite meals, played her favorite Disney soundtracks, and sat beside her for hours just to be near. But her daughter, the light of her world, had been dimmed. The system didn't just fail them, it buried them. By the end of the week, Ava had called the police department 4 separate times, trying to push for charges. Each time, she was told the same thing: the DA is reviewing the incident. The officer's body cam footage is under legal assessment. There's not enough evidence of intent to harm. Intent. What else could a shot fired at a child be? Warning or not, the bullet hit the mailbox less than 3 feet from Emily's head. Ava knew Brenda hadn't missed by accident. She'd missed on purpose. Just enough to escape consequence, just enough to remind them who held the power. Determined not to be silenced, Ava turned to a local news station. She contacted Channel 7 Investigates, submitted the full story, and even sent cell phone footage taken by a neighbor that showed Brenda screaming about castle doctrine while waving her gun. They never aired the piece. We reached out to the HOA for comment. The reporter emailed her. They deny wrongdoing and say this is a neighborly misunderstanding. Without police charges filed, our legal team has advised against airing the footage at this time. A neighborly misunderstanding? Ava slammed her laptop shut and nearly hurled it across the room. She wanted to scream. But more than that, she wanted revenge. And that's when a knock came at her door. It was late, well past 9 p.m., and Ava hesitated before opening it. But when she did, she was surprised to find Detective Laura Grayson standing in plain clothes and holding a small notepad. "I'm off duty," Laura said quickly, "but I live down the block. I saw what happened and what didn't happen." Ava blinked, caught off guard. "You're a cop." "Internal Affairs," Laura nodded. "I'm not here as part of the department. I'm here as a mother." They sat down in the living room, Emily sleeping quietly upstairs. Laura explained how she'd seen Brenda's behavior for months. Racial profiling. Unfounded complaints to the HOA about suspicious teens. Last year, Brenda tried to report a neighbor's biracial babysitter for casing the neighborhood. Nothing ever stuck. Her late husband had been a cop, and she still had ties inside the department. She plays the system, Laura said. She knows just how far she can go without crossing that invisible legal line. Ava clenched her fists, but she did cross it. She pulled a gun on a child. She knows how to spin it, Laura said. That no soliciting sign, that's her shield. The video footage she submits? Heavily edited. Trust me, she's smart and dangerous. But there is a way to take her down. That night, Laura promised to help. She couldn't act as law enforcement officially, but she knew someone who could. A man named Marcus Dunley, a decorated Army veteran turned legal advocate. He specialized in community justice, particularly in cases where HOAs were used as tools of harassment. Ava met Marcus the next morning. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a calm energy that immediately gave her a sense of safety. He had scars, both physical and emotional, but his eyes were sharp. Focused. "I've seen people like her before," Marcus said after hearing the story. "They hide behind paper, behind bylaws, but I don't fight on paper. I fight where it counts." He laid out a plan. First, they'd gather unfiltered evidence, unedited footage, credible witnesses, documents showing how the HOA bylaws had been twisted in Brenda's favor. Then they'd expose Brenda publicly in a way no HOA board or local official could suppress. They started with Brenda's digital footprint. A tech-savvy neighbor named Samantha joined the team, digging through HOA archives, community forum posts, and surveillance camera metadata. What they found was alarming. Brenda had rewritten portions of the HOA manual. In meetings where Greg had authorized certain restrictions, like mandatory supervision for children, Meeting minutes had mysteriously vanished. In one private email they recovered, Brenda wrote, "We can't have these types of families lowering the tone of Evergreen Heights. The bigotry wasn't just passive, it was documented." Ava also reached out to other families who had mysteriously moved out in recent years. One couple had been fined relentlessly for allowing their autistic son to draw chalk art on the sidewalk. Another woman, a young mother of two black boys, had been repeatedly reported for loitering while watching her kids play in their own driveway. Each of them had experienced the same silent, creeping aggression, and most had eventually left out of fear and exhaustion. But Ava wouldn't run. She would fight. Meanwhile, Emily remained frightened. She avoided the windows, jumped at loud noises, and refused to go outside without Ava. Therapy sessions began, but progress was slow. Ava broke down one night in the bathroom, sobbing silently as she stared into the mirror. Her daughter had once been fearless. Now she flinched at her own shadow. She looked at a photo of her late husband pinned to the medicine cabinet. Marine uniform, strong jaw, gentle smile. "I won't let her break us," she whispered. "Not my daughter." 2 days later, Ava received another courtesy warning from HOA. This one was about her overgrown lavender bush. But this time, she didn't rip it up in frustration. She filed it away. Evidence. Every message, every complaint, every lie. She was building a case. And soon, it would all come crashing down. Because Brenda thought she'd won. But she'd made the mistake of thinking a grieving mother wouldn't fight back. Ava wasn't going to stop. She was done playing defense. The counterattack had begun. Ava had always believed in quiet resilience. But that version of herself had been buried the moment Brenda fired a gun at her daughter and walked away without handcuffs. What took its place was something sharper, focused, unflinching, and ready to dismantle every inch of the fortress Brenda had built. She was done asking for justice. She would build it. Marcus came back the following morning with a large binder in hand. "This is a formal complaint packet. Civil, criminal, and HOA code violations backed by real evidence. But before we submit it, we need to crush any room for reasonable doubt. Brenda is too slippery. We don't just need to prove what she did. We need to corner her where she can't lie or twist her way out." Step one was turning Brenda's own surveillance obsession against her. With Samantha's help, they discovered something critical. Brenda's security system uploaded its footage to a cloud server. And while the camera angles she submitted to the HOA were heavily edited, the raw timestamps revealed inconsistencies. One clip, allegedly showing Emily lurking for 5 minutes near her porch, had been trimmed to hide the fact that Brenda had opened her door and shouted something before Emily even got close. The team managed to recover that raw footage. In it, Brenda's voice rang out clearly, "Get off my property, you little freak. I don't want to see your crippled wheels near my house again." The air left Ava's lungs. It wasn't just hostility. It was hate. Laura was furious. That's not just harassment. That's a hate crime. And she submitted doctored footage to law enforcement? That's obstruction. But Ava wasn't satisfied with just catching Brenda on a technicality. She wanted her exposed publicly, not as some misunderstood homeowner, but as the cold, calculating predator she truly was. So they laid a trap. Samantha reached out to a friend from her theater group, a single dad named Terrence and his 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily used a wheelchair due to brittle bone disease. She and Emily met over a Zoom call and bonded instantly. The plan was simple. On a Saturday morning, while Ava and Emily were out of sight, Lily would roll up Brenda's sidewalk, holding a basket of painted rocks and handmade cards. Nothing threatening, no solicitation. Just kindness. What Brenda didn't know was that 4 hidden cameras had been installed around the neighborhood, 2 in decorative birdhouses, 1 in a parked SUV, and another in a fake solar garden light. Everything was wired. Everything was watching. At exactly 10:42 a.m., Lily rolled up Brenda's walkway. She smiled. Not twice. Waited. Brenda opened the door, and the transformation was instant. Gone was the poised, self-righteous HOA matriarch. What emerged was a storm of venom. "What the hell are you doing?" Didn't your parents teach you how to read? No soliciting. Are you one of them? What kind of scam is this? Lily, visibly frightened, held out her basket. I just wanted to give you a card. I live close by. Brenda leaned forward, voice lowered to a hiss. If you roll up here again, I'll make sure your parents regret ever moving in. You kids think your wheels make you special? They don't protect you. That's when she reached for something just inside the door, the glint of silver unmistakable. She never got the chance to raise it. From behind a parked car, Marcus stepped out holding his phone. It's all on camera, Brenda. Every word, every threat, every step. Brenda froze, mid-motion, eyes darting to the hidden cameras, now blinking red. Her mouth opened, then shut. The rage drained from her face, replaced by something Ava hadn't seen before. Fear. Real fear. Terrence stepped forward too, holding Lily in his arms. My daughter is traumatized, you monster. And this time, you won't wiggle your way out. Brenda's lips trembled. I thought she was one of them. Doesn't matter what you thought, Marcus snapped. We've got weeks of footage, witnesses, and now, a hate crime on camera. That night, Ava sat with Emily as they watched the raw footage together. Emily held Ava's hand tightly. That girl, she's like me. She's brave. Just like you, Ava said. Emily didn't smile, but she nodded, and that was enough. Marcus filed the full report the next morning, not just with the police department, but with the state attorney's office, child protection services, and 3 major news outlets. He included everything. The uncut footage, the fake HOA documents, the edited tapes Brenda had submitted to authorities, and a notarized petition from 14 neighbors who had also been targeted or harassed by her in the past 3 years. The file was titled Brenda Thompson, A Pattern of Predation Under the Guise of Community Order. The next domino fell quickly. Greg, the HOA president, resigned within 24 hours of the report being made public. The HOA's lawyer released a statement saying they were deeply disturbed by the evidence and launching an internal audit. Brenda's access to HOA records was revoked. But the biggest moment came when a local investigative reporter named Nina Caldwell broke the story live on TV. Tonight, we reveal the dark side of suburban HOA abuse and the chilling footage of a homeowner who aimed her gun not just at a child, but at the very idea of decency. The story went viral. Brenda Thompson became a household name for all the wrong reasons. And Ava? She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't afraid. Because for the first time since moving into Evergreen Heights, she wasn't alone. She had allies. She had evidence. And she had a daughter worth fighting for at any cost. The storm had arrived, but this time, Ava was the lightning. 3 days after the footage aired, the streets of Evergreen Heights were quieter than ever, almost like the neighborhood was holding its breath. Mailboxes had fresh paint, lawns were suddenly immaculate, and Brenda Thompson's once pristine yard, it was barren. Her signature hydrangeas had withered in the summer heat. The HOA banner she'd proudly hung over her porch was torn down by someone in the middle of the night. The Queen of Control had lost her crown, and the entire neighborhood knew it. But Ava wasn't looking for symbolism. She was looking for justice. On Tuesday morning, 2 unmarked cars pulled up to Brenda's house. Out stepped Detective Ray Molina, an officer with a reputation for holding people accountable no matter how wealthy, white, or well-connected they were. Brenda opened the door with her usual flair, lipstick perfect, cardigan crisp, but the mask cracked when she saw who was standing beside Ray. State Prosecutor Megan Callahan, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a file full of printed screenshots and affidavits. Brenda Thompson, Ray began, "You are being placed under arrest for aggravated assault, endangering a minor, hate crimes under federal statute, and tampering with evidence in a criminal investigation." Brenda's mouth opened. "You can't. This is a mistake. I am the HOA vice chair." "Exactly," Megan said coldly. "Which is why this is so dangerous. You've weaponized that position to terrorize vulnerable families and cover it with rules." Click. The cuffs snapped around her wrists. Across the street, Ava stood with Emily and Marcus. Emily leaned against her, gripping her service dog's leash tightly. She wasn't smiling, but her breathing was steady, her eyes locked on the scene. "She doesn't look so scary now," Emily whispered. Ava squeezed her hand. "No, sweetie. Bullies never do when someone stands up to them." The news spread like wildfire, not just in their town, but nationwide. Social media exploded with reactions. Hashtag Justice for Emily started trending on X, formerly Twitter. Several disability advocacy groups released statements condemning Brenda's actions, and Ava began receiving emails from parents around the country. One read, "I watched the footage. I sobbed. My daughter uses a wheelchair, and we've faced the same quiet hatred. Thank you for not staying silent." But victory wasn't a straight line. Brenda lawyered up fast. Her legal team tried spinning the narrative, calling the footage inflammatory, arguing Brenda was reacting under duress, and suggesting Emily shouldn't have been left alone in a tense neighborhood. Megan Callahan shut that down in court like a freight train. In the preliminary hearing, she played the full footage, every frame. Brenda's voice calling Emily a crippled brat, her waving a pistol in Lily's face, the doctored security clips, the forged HOA letters accusing Ava of faking her daughter's disability to milk sympathy. Brenda paled as the judge stared down at her. "I've seen a lot in this courtroom," Judge Rourke said, "but I've never seen someone so meticulously abuse their position to dehumanize a child. Your bond is denied." Cheers erupted outside the courthouse. Inside, Ava wept, not out of sadness, but from the weight of relief. After all the gaslighting, threats, and fear, someone had finally said out loud what she and Emily had known all along. This wasn't just cruelty. It was calculated, weaponized hate. The HOA board, under pressure from the community and national attention, held an emergency vote. Not only was Brenda permanently removed, but Ava was nominated to join the board. And though she didn't seek power, she accepted, not to rule, but to prevent another Brenda from ever rising again. And that wasn't the end. In an unexpected twist, Greg, the HOA president who resigned quietly, agreed to turn over dozens of private messages Brenda had sent him over the years. They contained threats, bribes, and instructions for keeping families like Ava's in check. He said he'd kept them just in case, never imagining he'd need to protect himself from her. With that digital evidence in hand, Megan opened up a broader investigation into HOA corruption, targeting not just Evergreen Heights, but similar complaints statewide. Ava sat through every meeting, every deposition, every recorded statement. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a witness, a voice, a force. The emotional toll was real. Emily started seeing a therapist and had occasional nightmares about doorbells and gunshots. But she also joined an online support group for kids with disabilities who'd faced bullying. There, she met other girls who liked painting, comic books, and telling stories through voiceovers. And through that group, she started to heal, not just as Ava's daughter, but as her own person. Strong, clever, and never again invisible. One day, while they were cooking together, Emily said softly, "Do you think we won?" Ava looked at her and smiled. "We didn't just win. We changed the rules." The weight of that statement took a moment to settle. Because it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing Brenda or proving who was right. It was about reclaiming space, about daring to exist loudly in places designed to silence them, about every mother who was told to stop complaining, every disabled child told to stay out of sight, every system that hid cruelty behind community guidelines. Ava hadn't just stood up to Brenda. She'd shattered the mirror she used to reflect her hatred onto others and forced the world to look at the truth behind it. And truth, once exposed, is louder than fear, even in the quietest of neighborhoods. It was late autumn by the time the trial ended. The leaves in Evergreen Heights had turned golden, drifting lazily across freshly swept sidewalks. But it wasn't the landscaping that had changed, it was the people. Or maybe more accurately, how they looked at one another. Suspicion had turned into introspection, politeness into real apology, and silence into conversation. Brenda Thompson was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with additional charges pending from the Federal Civil Rights Division. No amount of privilege, HOA standing, or social reputation could save her now. Her face had been plastered across national news cycles for weeks. She wasn't the face of neighborhood order anymore. She was the face of abuse hidden behind suburban perfection. And yet, Ava found no joy in that. Justice, yes. Relief, absolutely. But joy? No. Because justice didn't erase trauma. It only stopped it from continuing. Emily sat across from Ava in the kitchen, her sketchpad open. The girl's hands, once hesitant, now moved with quiet confidence as she traced out a comic panel. In it, a superhero in a wheelchair confronted a villain wearing a HOA badge, shielding a family behind her. Ava smiled. "Is that you again?" Emily beamed. "Nah, this one's for Maddie." She said she used to cry when her neighbors laughed at her wheelchair. "I'm making her a story where she's not scared anymore." Ava felt something in her chest, like a wound, gently closing. Emily was still healing, but she wasn't broken. She was becoming. That night, Ava posted on the same neighborhood forum that once blamed her for everything, the place where trolls, HOA diehards, and cowards once roamed freely. Her message was short, but it resonated. "To anyone who once called me dramatic, difficult, or delusional, I forgive you. Not because I have to, but because my daughter taught me how powerful grace can be. Just don't confuse forgiveness with silence ever again." Within minutes, the comments rolled in. Some were defensive, some were awkward, but many were genuine. One neighbor wrote, "I let Brenda's lies shape how I treated your family. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Another added, "Ever since that day, my son has asked questions about disabilities and prejudice. You've made us better, even when we didn't deserve it." But perhaps the most surprising message came from Greg, the former HOA president. "Ava, I should have stopped her. I knew what she was. I knew the moment she smiled, when Emily flinched. I'm stepping down from everything. But if you ever decide to build something new, something inclusive, I want to help, even if it's just carrying chairs." She didn't reply to Greg, but she read it twice. Instead of sitting in that pain, Ava chose to build something. She partnered with local advocacy groups to host workshops in other gated communities across the county, Inclusive Living 101, they called it. They talked about bias, hidden abuse, and the dangers of unchecked HOA authority. And they didn't hold back. Emily attended one of them. She didn't say much, but she rolled up to the front and wore a shirt that read, "My life is not a violation." After the session, a little boy in the audience approached her. He stuttered when he spoke, but asked if she'd sign his cast. When she asked why, he said, "Because you look like someone who doesn't back down." Back in Evergreen Heights, things didn't become perfect overnight. There were still nosy neighbors, still a few whispers, but they no longer scared Ava, because now the community knew her story and chose to stand by her. The new HOA board held a vote and unanimously passed what they called the Emily Clause, a policy forbidding any HOA official from enforcing rules that discriminated, harassed, or disproportionately affected disabled residents. Violators would face immediate removal and be reported to state oversight boards. They framed the policy, hung it in the community center, right under a photo of Emily in her cape, wheeling past Brenda's old house, where a for sale sign still sat untouched. And on the first day of winter, when snow dusted the roads and holiday lights blinked through every window, Ava and Emily hosted a block party. Everyone came, even the ones who once looked away. There were cookies, cider, games, and a donation jar for a new local disability arts fund, which Emily named the Loud Bell Project, a cheeky nod to the doorbell that started it all. Marcus showed up, too, bringing handmade decorations with the kids from his shelter group. He gave Ava a hug that lingered, the kind that didn't need words. They were family now, somehow, woven together by pain, truth, and survival. As the sun set, Ava stood beside Emily, watching the lights flicker across the block. "Do you miss how things used to be?" Emily asked quietly. Ava looked at her. At the girl who had once been frightened to walk to a neighbor's door and now confidently chaired comic panels with kids who saw her as a hero. No, Ava said, because back then we were just surviving. She pointed to the party. Now we're living. Emily nodded. Then she grinned, pointing to a neighbor's lawn sign that read, "Everyone welcome and no exceptions." "Think Brenda's rolling in her jail bunk right now?" she asked mischievously. Ava laughed. "I hope so." And as the laughter filled the snowy evening air, Ava realized something powerful. She had thought this fight was about clearing her name, protecting her daughter, and exposing one monster. But it had always been bigger than that. It was about unmasking a system. And now that it had begun, there was no going back. Not for her. Not for Emily. Not for any child ever again made to feel like a nuisance for simply existing. Months passed. The seasons changed. Evergreen Heights looked the same from the outside, the rows of manicured hedges, the iron gates, the porch lights glowing in sync like soldiers at attention. But inside those fences, something fundamental had shifted, and Ava knew the truth now. Karen, Brenda Thompson, hadn't acted alone. Sure, she pulled the trigger. She screamed the words. She wore the smug expressions and made the threats. But the real villain was never just Karen. It was the silence of the neighbors who saw her aggression and said nothing. The HOA members who grumbled about Brenda's tactics in private, but voted for her every year anyway. It was the system that allowed unchecked power in the hands of someone who thought her title made her untouchable. It was the culture that dismissed Ava's concerns, that blamed her daughter for being too visible, that valued order over empathy, property values over human lives. Karen was the spark, yes, but the gasoline that had soaked the soil long before Ava moved in. Ava read an article one night titled "The Quiet Complicity of the Comfortable," and she felt like it had been written in her name, because that was the real horror, not one woman with a gun and a warped sense of control, but the hundred subtle approvals that empowered her. The little nods, the polite chuckles when Karen joked about cleaning up the neighborhood, the passive shrug when she changed rules mid-year to make life harder for undesirables. They had let her become that dangerous. They had rewarded her for it. And when Ava finally stood up, finally shouted, finally demanded justice, those same people were shocked, embarrassed, even, not at Karen, but at themselves, because deep down they knew. They just didn't care until someone bled. Ava didn't say these words out loud, not in speeches, not even in her interviews when reporters asked her what forgiveness looked like. But when she looked into Emily's eyes still bright, still resilient, still alive, she knew she'd never raise her daughter to believe that Karen was an anomaly. Because if she did, she'd be teaching her to fight shadows while the real enemy stood smiling in the daylight. Instead, Ava chose to raise Emily to recognize systems, to challenge structures, to question leaders, even the ones who spoke softly and carried rulebooks. At the dedication ceremony for the newly renamed Emily Grace Community Park, Ava spoke briefly. Not about Karen, not even about the shooting, but about choices. How we treat the most vulnerable, she said, is the truest measure of a community's soul. If we don't challenge cruelty, we invite it. If we prioritize comfort over conscience, we enable monsters to wear badges and live in cul-de-sacs. She ended with a quote from Maya Angelou, not just for flair, but because it felt earned. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. The crowd stood and clapped, not because it was the polite thing to do, but because they felt it, because they were finally ready to hear it. Ava didn't need to fight anymore. Not in the same way. She'd survived. She'd changed laws. She'd changed hearts. And most importantly, she'd raised a daughter who knew her worth could never be measured by how loud a neighborhood screamed. As the ceremony ended, Emily wheeled over and whispered, "Do you think they really believe it now?" Ava smiled. "Maybe not all of them," she said, "but we planted something, baby, and it's growing." Emily looked out across the field, full of kids, laughter, noise, and joy. "It's loud," she said with a grin. "Good," Ava replied. "Let it always be loud." If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel. HOA denied access for more real, raw, and powerful stories of justice, survival, and truth. Your support helps us expose what others try to hide.